All right, guys, so today I'm going to be doing my video on advice for Enneagram Type 7 from other Enneagram Type 7s. I want to say at the offset, as we go through this video, I'm probably going to laugh a lot, and I'm not meaning any disrespect, but the emails that I got from the 7s are absolutely comical. Not because they're stupid, but just because the way that 7s tend to communicate is very lively. And even sometimes just reading some of these emails, it's like I could hear a person's voice in my head saying the words. So they're really funny. I'm going to try and use some direct quotes because there were some pretty funny quotes in here. So if I quote you and I'm laughing, it's not a personal thing. It's not because I think you're stupid. It's because I think you're absolutely adorable. And thank you for sending me your email. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. When asked, the 7s that sent me emails, a lot of them pretty much said the same thing in terms of behaviors that they had as 7s that they later realized were problem behaviors. So the answers that I got were drug abuse, alcoholism, the abuse of illicit drugs, things of that nature, sexual promiscuity, chasing after adrenaline rushes, shopping. 1-7 very specifically said that her problem was FOMO, and I quote, all day, every day. FOMO, for those of you that don't know, is an acronym for fear of missing out. I also want to add just a note on the side right now about the adrenaline rush thing, because I think when we say 7s pursue an adrenaline rush, I think a lot of people think of things that could get them killed, like skydiving, for example, and that is so very rarely it. Of course, actually, a lot of 7s are really interested in stuff like that, and they engage in those activities, but that's not a day-to-day thing that they do in order to stay externally engaged. Adrenaline rush for a 7 on a day-to-day basis could look something like shoplifting. It could look like playing online poker. An adrenaline rush for a 7 is just an opportunity for them to take a risk. They like the risk. They like knowing that there's the chance that they could lose something, the chance that they could get caught. They don't necessarily take the risk unless they're confident that they could, pull it off without losing something or without getting caught. But it's the idea that there's that chance that that could happen. That's where they get the adrenaline rush. And so they find little ways to do that throughout the day. So for the 7s that said adrenaline rush, that's probably more what they're talking about for those of you that don't know. The list of things that the 7s said that they started doing that really helped them get in touch with the self, which made it easier to deal with anxiety or things that they didn't feel that they could control, or feelings of emptiness or hurt that they didn't know how to process, were wide and varied, as one might imagine, considering that we're talking about Enneagram Type 7. Some of them were still activities of external engagement, just healthier versions, and some were activities of internal engagement. So, for example, the external engagement activities were going to the gym, taking yoga classes, going to the movies. 1-7 specifically said that he chose to go back to school and finish his education because having the homework and being able to go to class every day was a better way for him to use his time. He could intellectually stay stimulated and engaged in a way that was actually benefiting him versus engaging in the other activities and the things that he used to do just to stay mentally stimulated. So, those things work too. They're not bad. They're definitely much better than, drug abuse and sexual promiscuity and bungee jumping or whatever the fuck else we had in those lists. But then I still had some 7s too that did more internal work. And that to me is key when you're a 7. The whole issue with being a 7 is they have a very hard time dealing with anything that feels uncomfortable. They have a hard time dealing with hurt, rejection, abandonment, feelings of emptiness, feelings of, I say anxiety, and we can talk about general anxieties as well, yes, but larger anxieties about life. What if this doesn't turn out the way that I wanted it to? What if I have been working this hard for this entire time and it's all going to fall apart and it's not going to be what I have been working for it to be, things like that. But then day-to-day anxieties, things about like relationships and money and maybe things at work and all of that sort of stuff. But a common thing that I've noticed with each of them too is they have a hard time dealing with guilt, specifically when they have hurt somebody. Things like that are what trigger those external behaviors in a 7. And so I say all of that to come back to the point. When 7s do more quiet internal work, that's a big fucking deal because it is so incredibly hard for them. I even actually had one 7 say in an email that even sitting for 5 minutes in the quiet with her phone off, no music, no TV, in a room by herself, just sitting, staring at a wall for 5 minutes is one of the hardest things to do. And it might not appear initially that that's hard because it's a recognition of anxiety. At first, for a 7, it's hard just because it's fucking boring. So they're sitting there and they're kind of like, what's the point of this? And I've noticed too, like for 7s, especially if they turn their phone off and they don't have their phone, they go fucking ape shit. Like you take a phone away from a 7, I mean, oh man. Like if you really want to piss one off, I mean, if you just like want to get back at them for something, like legit, just swipe their phone and hide it from them or something, they will, I mean, actually, you don't want to get caught doing that actually, because it's not going to be pretty when they find it. But yeah, so 1-7 specifically said sitting for 5 minutes, even without her phone, anything like that was difficult for her. And again, I don't think it's necessarily because immediately they have the emotional recognition. I think it's just because they're bored. And especially when the phone's off and, you know, the instinct is to reach and just go for the phone, scroll through Facebook, do whatever it is you do. And it's not there, then there's an anxiety that starts to rise up there. Whether or not 7s understand to recognize that feeling as anxiety, it is anxiety. And I'm going to make a point here that's very, very important. For a type 7, boredom and anxiety are the same thing. When they're bored, it makes them anxious. Okay? Anxiety for 7 could also be other things, but if they are feeling bored, they are feeling anxious at the same time. It's the same thing for them. Okay? But some of the quieter things that were mentioned were meditation, journaling. I actually did have a lot of 7s that did say that they would sit in a room, turn the phone off, no music, no TV, and they would set timers for 5 minutes and they would just force themselves just to sit for 5 minutes and just sit, which is fantastic. I recommend all of those things to 7s, even though every time I do, they roll their eyes and absolutely give it no credit whatsoever, which is unfortunate, but it's also understandable because when you are such an assertive personality and you've spent your entire life in life and interacting with it, engaging with it, forcing it to bend to what you want it to be, the idea of needing to sit and be quiet and do nothing is just absurd. It's like a joke. I imagine if I were a 7 and somebody told me that, my response would probably be, why would I do that when the way that I live right now is already working so well for me? So kudos to the 7s that decided to do that. Some of the 7s that emailed me had said that their job, their workplace environment was really important in terms of being a psychologically healthy person. Specifically, what some of these emails have said is that 7s said that if they had to work for somebody else or they were in a really micromanaged environment, overall, it just made their mental and emotional state much, much worse. And it would carry over to their life and their relationships outside of work. And just overall, it made things very difficult for them. Versus I had a couple of other 7s that said that they owned their own businesses or they at least had jobs where they were kind of able to freely roam around and do what they needed to do without being micromanaged. And those 7s said that once they chose to start dealing with their anxieties and focusing more on psychological growth, going to counseling, fixing all sorts of issues, etc., they found that, or I'll say this, they believed that having a work environment that didn't have that stress is part of what contributed to their success, because they could have imagined being in a much more micromanaged work environment and it being so very difficult for them to make any sort of progress outside of that, which I think is a really interesting point, because where you work is so incredibly pertinent to your psychological state. You spend more waking hours at your job every week than you do outside of your job if you're working like a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday job. So it's especially important that your work environment be a place that is psychologically conducive to you. And so I was really glad that the sevens that said those things brought them up, because it's a really important point, not just for sevens, but for other Enneagram types as well. If you have a lot of problems that are going on at work, it makes it very, 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 very difficult for you to function in relationships and in your life outside of work. It makes it very difficult for you to do the things that you're trying to do to become more in touch with the self and to become a healthier person, such as the yoga, the journaling, the meditation, etc. Those things are harder to maintain and keep up when you have a very stressful work environment. So I was glad that they brought it up. It was a really good point. I had a couple of sevens say that having kids is one of the best things that's ever happened to them, because when they had a child, it forces you to stop that fast-paced lifestyle that you're living, and you can't focus on you anymore. You have to take, I'd say, 90% of that energy that you were investing in going out with your friends and going shopping and taking vacations and just going out and getting to do whatever you want whenever you want. 90% of the energy that goes into that when you have a child goes into the child. And a lot of times the things that you put, the energy and the time that you put into raising a child isn't fun. You're at home cleaning a house, you're giving kids baths, you're changing diapers, you're going to get groceries, you're taking the kids to school, you're picking them up from school, you're doing homework. There's all of this stuff. And I had more than one seven say that that was a wake-up call, but it was really something that kind of forced them into maturity. They had to deal with the anxiety of being what they said is trapped. In other words, they had this kid and they realized, oh, fuck, my life as I knew it is now officially over. And there was a period of anxiety for quite some time. But then as, the kids got older, they realized that having those children and being forced immediately into a situation where you now have no options, you have to restrict yourself to this type of lifestyle, brought them to a place where they had to start to do that work internally with their anxiety and the emptiness and all of the stuff that comes up that sevens have inside of them that they don't have any fucking clue that they have inside of them that they need to deal with. That doesn't come up until they find themselves in a life situation where they have maybe married the wrong person or had kids, and they or if they lose a job and they lose all of their money and they're in a very, very tight financial situation. Those are the sorts of things that are like wake-up calls for seven. So I always say, if you're a seven and you think you've got your shit together, get married, have a kid, or just quit your job and live off the kindness of strangers. That will show you if you have your shit together. I mean, we could say that about anybody, but sevens will know. They'll know. I'm just kidding. Don't get married and don't have kids just to psychologically test yourself, please. That's not fair to other people. In listing some of the benefits and the positive changes that sevens have seen in their lives as a result of the different things that they've been doing, the meditation and the journaling, and the active pursuing of the development of self and self-awareness, I got a lot of really good stuff, actually. I had one seven, for instance, who said that relationships changed for her. She was able to engage with people on a much more intimate level. In fact, the seven that sent me this very specifically said she only thought that she had intimate relationships before until she learned how to deal with her own anxieties, and especially to deal with pain and guilt. And all of a sudden, over years, of course, it doesn't happen overnight, but she began to develop a degree of vulnerability that she thought she had before but didn't have. And so now she's able to engage more intimately in relationships with other people without fearing being hurt or needing something emotionally from them and then not being able to give it. I do want to actually, I'm going to say that here, that very specifically is the key anxiety or the key pain, if you will. Sevens have this fear, and again, most of them don't know it because sevens are so externally focused, but sevens have this fear that they're going to enter into relationship with another person. They're going to have an emotional need that they need to have met, usually one for nurturing, comfort, support, security, that sort of thing. And that other person isn't going to provide it for them. And so anyways, that's a core issue for type 7. And so I had the 1/7 say that because of all of the work that she's done to become more self-aware and to grow as a person, she's now able to engage intimately in relationships and be completely open and completely honest. And the fear of needing something emotionally from another person and not receiving it is still there, but it's not debilitating anymore. It doesn't prevent her from having the meaningful relationships that change her life. I had other 7s say that they have learned how to be really present in the moment. The same 7 said that previously they only thought they were present in the moment until, again, they started doing their, what I like to call their quiet work, their meditative work, whatever it is that you want to call it, where they start focusing more inward and less outward. And the 7 that said that said, again, she only thought that she knew how to live in the moment and be fully present and enjoy life until she started doing all of this. And now she realizes what it really means to be present in the moment. And for 7s, I think 7s are under the impression that they know how to live in the moment. If you talk to a 7 and you ask them, a 7 will tell you that they don't dwell on the past. They don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. They're not really worrying too much about the future. They're just going to live for right now and they're going to have a ton of fun. And 7s call that being present in the moment. That's a way of being present in the moment, but it's a way of being present in the external moment. 7s are not present in the internal moment, okay? At least not ones that are self-unaware. The 7s that have sent me these emails obviously are, because they became aware of the fact that they weren't and have started working on doing that. But anyway, so when they talk about learning how to be present in the moment, the 7 that sent me that was talking about learning how to do all of the things that she's been doing, but this time, instead of focusing so much on what's happening outside, learning how to listen to what she's feeling inside as she's doing things moment by moment and registering those feelings as they're being triggered, good, bad, scary, whatever it is. That's what gives you a sense of completeness and fullness in life. It's also what gives you a sense of completeness of self. And that's another thing that I would say about 7s. Most of them who are unaware that they're 7s, they think they know who they are. They don't know who they are. They don't. 7s know what they like. They know what they don't like. They know what they'll tolerate, what they won't tolerate, what they want, what they don't want. They think they know what they need and what they don't need, but they don't. But they assume that knowing all of those things means that they know who they are. And granted, those things are aspects of who you are, but they are just minuscule, itty bitty, tiny little aspects of who you are. I mean, if we imagine, in an analogy, if we imagined the self as a cupcake, those things are just like little sprinkles on top. There's so much more there that needs to be explored. And that's the stuff that 7s don't pay attention to. So, I mean, just as a side note, 7 said that when they started making the conscious decision to pay more attention to what's going on inside in terms of emotion and giving less attention to thoughts and external stimuli, that they learned how to develop patience. So for 7s, they like life to move along at kind of a fast clipped pace. And when that doesn't happen, that's very frustrating for 7s, which is what they'll tell you. What they don't recognize is that feeling of frustration for a 7 is anxiety. So it's very anxiety producing for 7s because they like to keep moving. Things need to keep changing and keep moving, keep them stimulated so that they don't have to stop and get stuck in the same place, which is boring. They don't have the same stimulation because that's when you have to start dealing with things that you feel, such as the anxiety and the frustration at not being able to live the lifestyle that you're used to living. And that attention inwards, they don't have as much anxiety now if they have like whatever 5-year plan in place and it's been 6 years and they still haven't seen the fruition of the plan. And even little tiny things, like I had one 7 say that she used to get really frustrated if she had to wait in a really long line or if she had to sit in traffic, that it would just literally eat away at her. She would get angry. It was amazing. She said how fast her temper would go from 0 to 60 just because she had to wait someplace. And since she decided to start paying more attention to things internally and doing activities that allowed her to do that. Again, such as quiet meditation and journaling and spending time alone and in the quiet. Those are just a few examples. She said that she found that now she can be in sitting in traffic or waiting in a really long line someplace and she doesn't have that anger. And I'm going to tell you the reason that that is because when a 7 is sitting in traffic and they're not moving, and when they're sitting in a long line and they're not moving, it's that feeling of being stuck. It's like, come on, we need to hurry up. Why is this taking so long? I don't understand. And it triggers that anxiety. It is a miniature version of the anxiety that 7s get, again, when they have a 5-year life plan and it's been 6 years and the plan hasn't come to fruition, when they have a job and they're busting their ass at this job to get some sort of a particular outcome and they still haven't gotten it and they don't know why, or worse yet, they bust their ass and it all falls apart anyway. That's just a miniature version of that type of anxiety. So I thought it was really cool that I had one 7 mention that even something as small as just being stuck in traffic or waiting in a long line somewhere changed when she started to give more attention to how she was feeling in the moment as she did things one thing at a time. Lastly, I want to talk about this. Every single email that I got from a type 7 that wanted to participate in this series is a recovering drug addict or alcoholic. So while I'm here and I'm talking about it, I want to acknowledge that and say congratulations to every single one of you that sent me an email. These really are some phenomenal life stories. A lot of them did write me life stories, and I got to read a lot about some of the things that they've gone through. Simultaneously, just some heartbreaking and absolutely wonderful stories all at the same time. So that's entirely awesome. And I'm really thankful that those of you that chose to share those stories have chosen to do so. And I'm really happy for you guys having been in recovery as long as you have. That's pretty cool. With that being said, that's an important thing for the rest of you to keep in mind, because guys, if these 7s can do it, you for damn sure can do it. I mean, there's no excuse. Like if somebody living under a bridge that was sticking a needle in their arm every fucking 30 minutes, who somehow managed to survive that, get into recovery, and be here to watch my channel and write me an email today, if they can do this shit, you can fucking do this shit. So I don't want to hear no 7s bitching to me about how, sitting in a room for 5 minutes with their phone turned off is hard. I just don't want to hear it. As addicts in recovery, they all said to some extent that something that's been really important for them as they've gone through recovery was having a social support system that was supportive of their recovery. And that's true. That is very much a part of addiction recovery. But that can tie into, if you're just a 7 that's never had any sort of substance abuse problem, you're just, a regular Joe Schmo doing life like the rest of us. That's also something that's important too. Very specifically, what the 7s who are in recovery, which is all of them, because again, they were all addicts of some kind, said was that the emotional support systems that they found helped them were the ones where they had people who genuinely loved them and wanted to see them get better, but who were not afraid to call them on their bullshit. I'm going to say that that is a good thing for any 7 to have, again, because when you're a 7, you're going to be a very naturally confident person, which is understandable because when you're a 7, life just works for you. And by that, I don't mean that you get everything that you want when you want it, but you have such confidence and charisma and determination and such a positive outlook that life just becomes what you want it to be. If not immediately, then over time. And if it doesn't, you know how to adjust, and then you go on being just as happy as if you had gotten what you wanted, okay? And so it's for that reason that you need to have people in your life that are going to call you on your bullshit, because a lot of 7s, I don't think, fully see that they're full of bullshit. And full of bullshit is an extreme statement. They're not full of bullshit, but 7s don't have their shit together the way that they think they do. And even for me, I'm a 6, just as an outsider looking at 7s, it for damn sure looks like they have their shit together. I have never in my life met a 7 and looked at them and was like, wow, that's a train wreck, or man, they're going through a really hard time right now. It's never happened. Every single 7 I've ever met, they look happy, they look successful, they just look like they've got all of the confidence in the world. It's not till I've gotten to know them that I realize that there are those insecurities there and that everything behind the curtain isn't necessarily the way that it's presented to be. And I think 7s don't often know that what they have behind the curtain is a mess because they don't go behind the curtain. They spend a lot of time on stage. not behind the curtain, if that makes sense, not backstage, in other words. And so it's good to have people in your life that are going to call you on your bullshit. Again, people that genuinely care about you, not people that are going to call you on your bullshit just to tear you down. Okay. That's an important thing to have. More importantly than that is when you have someone in your life who you know loves you and they call you on some bullshit, shut the fuck up and listen to them. I'm not saying you have to accept what they say. Most sevens aren't going to do it anyway. But if you're a seven, if you can at least sit down and just listen to what they have to say, do not interrupt them. Don't defend yourself. Just sit and be quiet and intently listen. And while you're listening to what they say, when they call you on your bullshit, pay attention to how you feel about yourself while they're talking and saying what they're saying. It's not what they say that's going to make the difference necessarily. It's what you recognize as an emotion that starts to come up inside of you while you're saying it. Okay? Pay attention to that. That's the beginning of self-growth. That's the beginning of finding yourself in general. That's the beginning of what will become real confidence for you down the road, and real fulfillment, by the way. That's the majority of what I got from Enneagram Type 7 to participate in this series. So I am going to, as always, open up the comments underneath of here so that the sevens can form a little support group if they need to. If I said something in here that wasn't accurate and you want to correct it, or if I left something out that you think would be beneficial, or if you just want to toss in some other thoughts or insights, you're more than welcome to. I will say too, if you were watching this video and you were like, hey, I'm a 7 and I think maybe that I kind of need some help to get my shit together, which, I mean, I understand is probably not likely, but in the unlikely event that you did, do bear in mind that I offer life coaching sessions, Enneagram and Myers-Briggs based life coaching sessions. I cover a variety of different topics. Some examples include people that have lost their jobs or have retired and they want to find a new thing or a new career or something to do to pursue in life that aligns with more of who they are as a person that will bring them fulfillment. I get people who are going through really, really bad breakups or divorces and have just lost somebody and they need to go through a grieving process. Also, I have a Patreon account that you can check out where I put all sorts of Enneagram and Myers-Briggs information too. It's certainly not just all on YouTube. And then I've got a Twitter account as well if you want to follow me on there. I'm going to put all of that down in the description underneath. So yeah, thanks again.